Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle, where professionals in the field inform, educate and inspire the community to be healthier, more balanced and live the lifestyle they love. Our first guest today is Mark Noyce, and he's an urban food specialist, and the topic we'll be discussing is the joys and benefits of creating your own urban garden. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming. So Mark, what are the joys and benefits of creating your own urban garden?
The joys of urban gardening are multiple. There are so many joys of urban gardening, which include your own nutrition, your mental health, contacting and being in contact with your friends and reconnecting with your family that you haven't seen, your long lost aunt that you haven't seen for a while. Urban gardening just gives you that excuse to knock on the door and say, hey, I've got some food. Would you like to share a meal with me? I grew this in my own garden. One plant that I grew can actually benefit 5 or 6 other families. It's amazing when you value add. Chilies, for example, you can grow your own chilies, and these small plants that you can grow in a very small space go a long way. And that's one of the things about being able to give, being able to look after something, looking after your own nutrition, looking after your friends and family. And that's really what the joys of urban farming is about. It's also about knowing where my food comes from. Growing your own food, you know what went into it, you watched it grow, you watched it mature, and then you know exactly where that food comes from. So that gives a sense of self-satisfaction. It also gets a sense of pride that I did something for myself. And not only that, it's fun. It is just fun to come home and see your garden. Like sometimes I talk to my plants. After a long day, I go out there and I say, hey plants, how are you going? And they seem happy to see me because if you give them the right things in terms of sunlight, water, food, they look after themselves, okay? And then they give back a healthy, nutritious food plant. So not only can we have individuals growing food, we can actually have communities growing food. And I get involved in schools, I get involved in community gardens, and where from nothing, a community comes together, and sometimes people are quite isolated and they don't have any friends, they don't have any family nearby, and they're living in a very small space. So to be able to come to a urban farm and meet people, share food and share stories of how to grow food and tips and tricks. Schools are absolutely fantastic mechanisms to get young people into urban farming. Learning from the ground up how to look after yourself, how to look after others, from growing your own food at home and getting in contact with your food and learning about where your food comes from is just setting up our whole next level, next generation of urban farmers to be self-sufficient.
Mark, I live in a small urban environment. How can I overcome some of those challenges in creating my garden?
In cities, we live in a concrete jungle. Sometimes there's not a lot of space, sometimes there's not a lot of light, and we're busy too. So sometimes we don't have a lot of time to give to our plants. So these are real challenges. Wind's a really big problem in urban environments. It can get very windy. There are stray pets, there are bugs, there are things that want to eat all our produce. It seems like everything's against us in an urban environment. But these challenges can be overcome when you have the right technology, when you have the right approach, when you get your nutrition right for your plants, when you get the watering right, and if you can get your plants to self-water, if you can get your compost, you can close your nutrient loop by composting your own green waste at home, turning that into a resource for plants to grow, and closing our nutrient loop is really a great way of being self-sufficient and overcoming these challenges that cities have where our food waste is a one-way street. We can turn that around. Cities also have abundant stormwater or rainwater runoff, so we have an abundance of water, we have an abundance of nutrition in terms of food waste. We can turn those around in an urban environment to grow healthy, nutritious food. And we can do it in really small spaces.
What are some top tricks and tricks for our audience to create their own urban gardens?
It depends on what you're going to grow. So if you want to grow tomatoes, for example, they need a lot of sunlight. They need like up to 10 hours of sunlight a day. If you want to grow lettuce and herbs, well, some of these plants can survive and thrive, if you like, on only 4 hours of sunlight. So it really depends on where your balcony's placed, where your sunlight comes in, and what you want to grow. So knowing a little bit about the types of plants you want to grow really helps set up where you need to put them, helps set up your urban farm in terms of what produce you're going to get out, and you can grow a lot of food in a very small space. In some cases you can grow up to 25 kilos worth of food in just 1 square metre, which is amazing. So if you think about what an average person would consume in Australia, and that's 75 kilos of vegetables per annum. We should eat 150, but only 5% of Australians get to 150 kilograms of vegetable matter per annum. So we can get our average food consumption in only 3 square metres, which is amazing. So a tip would be find a space that's relatively sunny. Try to protect your plants from the wind as much as possible with either netting, and get yourself a wicking garden bed. Now, if you don't know a wicking garden bed, if you've ever put a dishcloth into the water, you see the water rise up out of the water up the dishcloth. Well, that's wicking. That is capillary action. So that's what draws water up from a water reservoir. And a wicking garden bed allows you to have a self-watering pot plant that has a water reservoir that is always making water available to the plants. And so if a plant has access to water whenever it needs it, it's going to be optimal, it's going to reach its full potential, and you're going to have a healthier garden every single time. Get the other things right in terms of soil nutrition, which is a high quality compost, something very fibrous to help draw that water up out of your wicking garden bed or your self-watering pot plant, and your plant will be as healthy as it possibly can. Get the right nutrition into the compost, and it'll have all the trace elements that it needs. So a good quality potting mix is essential. You can make your own potting mix by composting at home, taking your green waste and turning that into a nutritious source of food for your plants. And technology has come a long way with wicking garden beds these days. So you can have free draining and wicking in some of these systems, which is optimal.
Thanks, Mark. That's such good, useful information. If you'd like to know more about Mark Noyce and the benefits of creating your own urban garden bed, please go to his webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we'll have another interesting guest with another interesting topic.